I'm a realtor and an investor. And I met Kristina and Richelle through the internet, which is full circle. We are partnered on a property, and I own property with my family. We've partnered many different ways, and I am super passionate about education. So I love this group. I love like how much people want to learn about this topic and how connective it feels to, you know, be a part of a female dominated real estate group, because it's not very common. So I'm really excited to hear from Kristina and Richelle, because this is like magic information. And I'm hoping to do this soon also. So Richelle or Kristina, whoever's next.
I can go. I'm Kristina Modares. I am co-founder of Open House with Steph. Open House is a first-time homebuyer education hub. So we teach first-time homebuyer workshops and, you know, yeah, just walk people through the process. So yeah, that's a little bit about Open House and me.
You want to go to my slide that has my things about me so I remember?
Yes.
I'm Richelle. I am a mortgage lender at Fairway Independent Mortgage Company.
There we go. Right.
Partner and woo! Like, I look better there. I don't have a bra or deodorant on right now. It's real life. I met Steph and Kristina on the internet, as Steph said, and we just super bonded over these principles and really building massive portfolios of real estate and using that to build freedom in your lives. I bought my first property in 2017 as a single self-employed person, and so that quickly became my favorite type of client to work with. I feel very passionate about helping young women purchase property on their own, either as first-time home buyers or investors, because I think it's pretty rad to do things that might otherwise culturally not be as prominent. We don't see a lot of examples of that, so I'm very excited about that. So yeah, I bought my first property in 2017. I bought my second property the next year. 2018 would be the year that followed, with Steph and Kristina. And then my third property in January of this year, and still somehow roped Steph and Kristina into that deal as well, with a couple other investment partners, which is really fun. And I did my most recent project with this strategy that we're talking about tonight. So we're going to actually dive mostly into Kristina's numbers for an example, but mine are very similar, and I may refer to my example as well as to how I pulled cash out to purchase another investment property.
And this property, the first property you purchased, Richelle, you cash out refinanced recently, right? And
that's the one I cash out yeah.
How much did you pull out?
I pulled out $90,000.
Crazy, to buy another investment. So that's what we want to talk about. I think we were just talking about that. We were like, we should have named this some like a sexier name, because like refinance does not sound like, it sounds boring, but I just found out all my numbers today for my cash out refinance, and I was like, oh my gosh, this is so crazy. Like, I did not realize how great this could be. Oh wait, did I do that? Okay, yes, okay. Well, anyway, so we want to start the presentation, and if you guys have questions, feel free to ask them in the chat, and we'll try to answer them as we go, so we can make this pretty interactive.
Yes, please do. Definitely want to hit questions. And I don't have my chat box open, so Kristina, a lot of stuff. If you can just let me know, flag if there's something that needs to be answered. Okay, so what is refinancing? Unfortunately, as Kristina said, there's nothing sexy about it. It's a bank term, and it's not that exciting. But it's a very simple process of getting a new mortgage. And typically, so there's a couple different kinds of refinances. The one that most people are thinking of when you hear just sort of plain old refi is considered a rate term refinance. And that is typically done when you're trying to improve your interest rate because rates have gone down, as they have recently, or the terms of the loan. So a standard conventional mortgage is very often 30 years. That's kind of the traditional mortgage that you hear of. Sometimes people like to refinance into a shorter term loan, either because they're refinancing anyway for that lower interest rate and figure they might as well shorten the term of the loan because they've been paying on it for 4 or 5 years and don't want to reset that 30-year clock, or they just see the advantages of paying less interest on like a 15 or 20-year loan and might be in a financial situation where they're qualified to do that they wouldn't have been otherwise when they purchased their home. So when you get a new mortgage, you basically are paying off the old one and resetting the clock, resetting the terms of your mortgage, and making those payments brand new. So just flat old refi. So the question then is, what is a cash out refi and how does that differ from a rate term refi? So in a cash out refi, instead of just replacing the existing mortgage that you had, so let's say you bought a $250,000 house and had a $200,000 mortgage on it. If you were doing just a rate term refi, you're basically just, again, paying off that $200,000 mortgage and getting a brand new mortgage for $200,000 or somewhere thereabouts. If you're doing a cash out refi, it's because you have gained significant equity in your home, and you want to tap into that by accessing it through a loan. So you're basically, the term you're mortgaging your house or getting a second lien is sort of common language around this. Cash out refi is not a second lien, but it operates in a similar way in that you're taking a loan against the house that you already own because you have equity that you've created either through renovations or appreciation or some combination of the two. Some common reasons people do this are going to be debt consolidation. This is a really good strategy for certain types of debt consolidation. I don't always recommend this just because it does mean that you're taking your debt and spreading out over 30 years. So even though you're going to get a significantly lower interest rate than you might on like a high interest credit card or other high interest types of loans, spreading that payment out over 30 years means you end up paying like significantly more over interest. However, I've seen plenty of financial situations where it is actually the best move to just knock out debt and reset and put people in a lot better situation to be able to, achieve some other financial goals. Home repairs is a big one. So this could be another really great strategy if you want to stay in your house. We're obviously talking about an investment strategy tonight, but if you wanted to stay in your property and make some repairs, do an addition, renovate a bathroom or a kitchen, and don't otherwise have the cash or want to spend your other cash or savings, this is a really great way to tap into that, to have money to be able to pay for those renovations and hopefully potentially continue to increase your equity over time. And then really great reason, which is my favorite reason for a cash out refi and what Kristina is doing and what we're talking about tonight and what we're excited about, is tapping into that equity and using that loan to purchase another investment property. So this is the only form of debt that you can use to pay for a down payment on another house. If you were to just take out a personal loan or credit card loan or loan from a friend, you'd have all kinds of issues in underwriting trying to get a conventional loan or an FHA loan qualified with a like basically none of your money, your actual money that's not debt, as your down payment. This can be used 100% as your down payment, pretty much no questions asked. The numbers still have to work, of course, for debt to income ratio and other things that we'd be looking at normally on a loan application. But again, really, really great strategy if you have the equity in your home, if that's something that you've created, to be able to put a pretty significant chunk of change, as you'll see in Kristina's example, down for an investment property that you might not otherwise be able to access.
Awesome. I have control of this. So also, can you guys see my chat? Can you see this? The chat? No? Okay, cool. I just want to have it up. So I see someone asked, so if you do a cash out refinance, do you get the cash in your bank account or do you get a line of credit that you now have to pay back?
You get the cash in your bank account. So it's basically when you close, if you were to do, so you get your closing disclosure that's going to have how much money and where all that money is going. If you're paying off liens, so let's say you're paying off the original mortgage, you're paying off, sometimes you can pay off other debt with it through the close, and that would be documented on your closing disclosure and dispersed by the title company. And then the rest of the money or the cash to the borrower then gets wired into whichever account you designate.
Yeah, so you can just get it. Someone else asked, are there any fees or tax implications of getting this lump sum in your bank account?
Fees, I would say, is going to depend more on the bank than the transfer, like the actual mortgage side of things. And then tax implications, actually one of the really freaking awesome things about this strategy is that money is tax-free because it's debt.
Yeah, that's awesome. Okay, I'm going to go. Okay, so we're going to jump into kind of my cash out refinance story. So the second house that I bought with my sister, Steph. Coincidentally, her name is also Steph, and she's on here right now. So I, at the time, so I was self-employed. I was a realtor, didn't have 2 years backing of big enough income for the house that I wanted to buy. So, and my sister, so I had like cash, but I didn't have the W-2 job. And then my sister had the W-2 job. So we were like, well, maybe we could partner in some way. So she definitely, helped out and applied for the loan. Hold on. So that is how we got approved. That's me and her when we bought it and renovated. So we didn't do a lot of the renovations. We like painted, we did like some fixture stuff, which was still a lot of work because we are not handy people. Okay, let me move these things around. Okay, so I bought my house in 2017 for $280,000. So my interest rate was 4%. I put 10% down, and then hold on, sorry, I can see my video. I need to move this because I can't see my presentation. And then, so in 2017, we spent about $19,000 in renovating it. Just these past 2 years, I spent another $35,000 to redo the kitchen. What else did we do? Yeah, we redid the kitchen. I redid all my windows. I didn't really do too much to the curb appeal. As you can see, this is really what my house looked like kind of originally. Still looks like that. So we spent around $54,000 renovating the home. I put AC in it, painted. So originally AC, paint, replaced a couple windows. That's about it. And then recently did the kitchen, replaced all the windows. Also replaced the floors when I bought it. Let's see. So here's some of the before and after pictures. It was just like a really dark, really hot, humid home because there was no AC, which I'm like, it was crazy. And then, okay, so the numbers for my cash out refinance. So my existing loan now, before, like I haven't finished this cash out refinance, actually just talked to Richelle today to like finalize the numbers, and hopefully in the next couple weeks I can like move forward. So my loan right now that we have left to pay is $2,370. So that's what I've left. And then this would be my new loan amount, the $332. So my house just appraised at $415. So remember, we bought it at $280. It appraised at $415. And then I'm taking out as much cash from my house that I can. So, right, Richelle, you can only do an 80% loan to value.
Yes, on primary residence, single family, 80% loan to value.
So I could take out less, but I mean, we did the math and it just made sense where if I took out this amount, it like the interest rate was still really good, and it just, I don't know, it made sense. Also, it's more cash that I can do other investments with.
Yeah, and I say like it's definitely a personal decision on that loan to value, and kind of understanding what are you going to do with that cash. I tend to be of the opinion if you're doing it and you're accessing it and the mortgage payment isn't changing that much, it might be worth it to get as much as you can if you have a solid investment strategy for it. Taking it out and just holding on to it, maybe not great unless you're holding on to it to wait for the right property. But yeah, of course you can play with that and determine what the loan amount is that you're looking for. I also wanted to point out just like your actual equity. So if you had your value is $415,000 and you put, what was your number, 54 into it? 50?
Yeah, I think it was 54.
So basically, I mean, you spent 54, but then you've created 124,000 in equity. So almost 50% equity from the original purchase price from fairly minimal renovations and a couple of, 2.5 years basically of appreciation in Austin.
Yeah, it's crazy. I don't think I realized that till today. I was like, told my sister, I was like, jump on here so you can like see what happened and know what's going on. So someone said, does getting an appraisal for a refi raise your annual property taxes? So no, you want Travis County or whoever, you want the county to think that your house is a dump. So essentially so Texas is a non-disclosure state, meaning that they won't know how much you paid for your house. So they will, once you buy a house, they're going to send you a letter and it's going to ask you, but you just throw that letter away. You want them. So I think the city appraised my house this year for like $260, which is less than what I bought it for 2 years ago. So I'm just like, I still every year just protest my taxes just to keep them. I just want to keep them down. But that it won't raise your annual.
Yeah.
Long story short, it won't.
I actually also had a client recently get an appraisal for a refi that the county that they live in had appraised their house higher than their appraisal. So in that case, their appraisal actually came in handy because it was something that they could use to dispute that higher value too. So that could go either way. That's
very true. Shayla's asking she's saying my math isn't adding up. What's the 84,000 80% of?
It's not. There's some loan fees in there as well. So basically the 80% is of the 415. So that is 332,000. So that's the loan amount. With the 332, we're paying off the 237. We have another sheet that's going to go through this.
Yeah.
237, which is 95, and there's loan fees and prepaids and stuff in there.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, so I wanted to show you guys like more of like what the original loan was. So, okay, Stefan. So my mortgage payment now is $1,850, and then once I do this cash out refinance, it's just gonna go up like to, I think it's only $230. So this new mortgage, like I feel like it's not that big of a difference. So my original interest rate was 4%. So also there's a few reasons I wanted to do a cash out refinance. So one reason I wanted, to take my sister off the loan so she can have her buying power back and maybe we can buy another investment property. She's still going to be on this deal. Like she's going to be still a part owner of this house. We're just going to work up an operating agreement and rework those terms. And then obviously, wanted to pull out cash to buy other properties. So I think that's a lot of people asked me about refinancing. I think a lot of my clients, even who just bought last year, were like, oh, should I refinance? And I mean, we're going to go into this a little bit later, but I essentially was like, I don't think so. I asked them some qualifying questions, but in the end they were like, oh, I have to pay closing costs. Like, oh, I didn't. So a lot of people like might think it just sounds good, but you just have to make sure that it like the numbers work for you. Okay. So yeah, so it was a cool realization because finally I locked in. I think we were waiting for the rate to go a bit lower. With cash out refinances, interest rates aren't as low as like the standard rate, I guess.
Cash out refi will always be a little bit higher than either just a rate term refi or a purchase because it is considered a slightly higher risk loan for the bank. So your interest rate is going to be a little bit higher than what you might get if you were just doing rate term. But rates have been higher for refinances recently, basically because most mortgage companies were putting margins on top of what was market rates because the volume was just tremendous. And so it's kind of like a supply and demand thing. In order to pump the brakes a little bit on the volume, rates were higher. So part of our waiting, which we had to do anyway to get your appraisal and get your stuff through underwriting, also gave us some time to wait for those rates, those margins basically to be removed so we could get a more reasonable rate.
Yeah. Someone's asking, is it riskier or are there other considerations to do cash out refinance on an investment property, one that you don't live in? So is it riskier to do?
Yeah, so we'll talk about this in a second too in a little bit more detail what the actual numbers look like. You can't quite take out as much equity on an investment property because yes, it is considered slightly riskier. So you're gonna have quite a bit higher interest rate. That said, if you do have the equity and the numbers line up, the principal works the exact same way as far as tapping into that equity and pulling out cash. If you've got a pretty low loan to value, you can make it work.
Awesome. Okay, let me move on. Oh, did I do that? Is that? Okay, is that? Sorry, my computer's so slow. Okay, so what are my plans for the cash out refinance? So yeah, I wanted to invest this money. Also, it would be nice to have some savings, like a big chunk of savings, I feel like, but I also want to invest it. So the plan is to buy new Austin homestead. I bought this house 2 years ago. I was like single, thinking like, oh, maybe I'll like Airbnb it sometimes. And now I live with my boyfriend. He has a lot of projects. So I'm like, we need like more space just in general, because we only have one bathroom and it's like, I think our house is like 880 square feet. So I am excited for more space. So, and also I'm going to rent out this house either on Airbnb or just like a longer term rental. And then me and my sister plan to buy a second home in Florida. Kind of as an investment. Also, like we've just been, we kind of grew up going to this area in Florida. And so we are looking to have a place that our whole family can go to, but also like plan to cash flow with it. We're in Florida around like Seaside. So like the Panhandle kind of Destin area. We found a really cool house recently, it's like a weird dome house, but we are still working out those details.
Financing.
Yeah. Apparently you can't just finance a weird house, a dome house. Anyway, okay, Richelle, I'll let you.
All right. So this is kind of what we're talking about. I know some people are asking questions about like percentages and can you take out more from an investment property and how do you calculate this number anyway? So this worksheet, which go ahead and screenshot it, or we can also send this out after. And I need to move my people too. This is going to help you figure out how to calculate how much equity you have in your home and if this is something that is even possible for you, and then how much you might be able to actually get. So if you were to fill this out for yourself, and we can just use Kristina's numbers again in here, the current estimated market value, which again, for your estimate, you can go ahead and put in whatever you think the property might be worth. As part of the loan process, you are required to get an appraisal with a private appraisal company that will determine the market value. And that's the number that we're using when we're looking at these percentages. So the next section is going to be the LTV is your loan to value. And these are the maximums, meaning the maximum that you can pull out. So top line here is a single family residence. If it is your primary residence and you occupy the home, you can pull out up to, you can go to 80% LTV, like we're talking about. For Kristina's house, and the maximum on a single family investment property is 75%. So again, because an investment property is considered a little bit higher risk loan, you're going to be, you can't tap into quite as much equity there and pull that out because the banks want to have the security of the money in the house. I saw, Steph, you asked a question about what rates are on cash out refi and investment property. I haven't priced one recently, but if I had to guess, I would say high fives. Investment properties are still in the fives, like low fives right now. So we'd be mid to high fives on a cash out refi for an investment property. So again, just that's part of the, sort of making sure your numbers work when you're calculating what your new interest rate might be, especially if, let's say you bought a property originally as a primary residence and you have a low interest rate, like a, 3.754% interest rate on the home, and then you turn it into an investment property and now you want to do this. Your rate might actually go up. In Kristina's case, it went down because she still lives in the house and rates have gone down. But be careful to look at that and just make sure, with those new payments that everything's going to make sense for your cash flow and what you're trying to do there, big picture. Multifamily, so again, slightly higher risk here for a bank, although honestly, in my opinion, a multifamily investment property is lower risk, but I'm not the federal government, so I don't get to decide that. But a primary residence multifamily, so if you own a duplex or a quadplex, triplex, and you live in the property, so it's your primary residence, you can go to 75% LTV. And If you don't live in the property, it's an investment property. Multifamily, you can go to 70%. So again, that just means you have to leave a little bit more money in there and can't quite take out as large of a loan amount as you might otherwise be able to do. So in order to figure out your numbers, you're basically taking that maximum LTV, or again, if you decide we'll figure out the maximum amount. If you want to work backwards from there, you of course can and reduce your LTV, but maximum amount. So you'd put in, your 80% if you're talking a single family residence, 80% times the estimated value or the appraised value if you have that and know that. And that's going to give you that base loan amount. So that's where we're getting that 80%. I know you're asking, Shayla, you're asking like, what is that 80%? So that's 415,000 times 80% is the 332,000. And that's how we're getting Kristina's new loan amount of 332,000, because that's the maximum she can take out. Why the numbers weren't quite adding up for you too. One, we've rounded up. So these are like fairly round numbers, obviously not exact here. But we also have to look at loan fees. So when you're refinancing, you have the option to bring cash to close and pay for that. When you're doing a cash out loan, it doesn't really make any sense to bring cash to cover the closing costs, because you'd be paying $5,000 and then getting like $85,000 back. And it doesn't make sense to pay cash to get cash. So those costs are rolled into the loan. So you have to factor in typical loan fees, which are going to cover administrative fees, underwriting, title fees will be mandatory and required. Your fees will be slightly lower if you are not escrowing. So if you don't have taxes and insurance rolled into your payment, you will have slightly lower loan fees and might be able to pull out a little bit more cash. You can't do that on an investment property, a multifamily investment property. Those need to stay escrowed, but on a single family, you should be okay to do that if you wanted to reduce your loan fees. But you do need to calculate that, because it's going to come out of that total amount. So in Kristina's, again, I think it's like maybe 7,000, 6 or 7,000. I don't have these in front of me. So we're taking that 332. We're paying off her existing mortgage, 237. We're taking care of those loan fees. And that's how we're getting the, that cash out of, it's roughly, I think it's closer to like 85-ish, but roughly $85,000 for the cash out. And then if you wanted to take that one step further, when you're looking at like, okay, what can I do with this? Like, how do I then use this money to buy something else? I like to use that calculation on the bottom to figure out how much of a house. So let's say I have $84,000. How much of a house can I buy with that? I think a good budget for that is thinking that that $84,000 needs to be 20 to 25% down on a new property. Even if you're calculating 20%, you're going to, again, want some money for closing costs, for reserves. So I think it's a really safe estimate to do. So to figure that out, you could do 84,000 divided by 0.25 is 336,000. So Kristina could go buy another investment property with that cash and be totally fine for up to $336,000.
Oh, interesting. I did not know that. So I think, okay, Emily's asking, how soon can you refinance a home after purchasing it? What's the point for wanting to do a cash out refinance? Example, hitting a certain amount of appreciation or amount of renovations or amount of equity in a home.
Yeah. Okay. So you can refinance after 6 months. If you try to pay off a loan before 180 days, there's fees associated with that if you have a conventional or FHA loan. So 6 months is the soonest you can do it. The tipping point is making sure that you have enough equity. So if Kristina, let's say Kristina's home was she had only gotten the value up to 350,000. Now we're looking at that value of 350, multiplying that by the 80% and getting 280,000. I should use a lower number. I'm going to say it was only worth 300,000. So 300,000 times the 80% is $240,000 is like the maximum loan amount that she could get. That would mean we have to pay off a $237,000 mortgage and she'd be left with $3,000. So not really worth doing a cash out refi, because we could have just done a rate and term refi and gotten a much better rate. So it's making sure that you have enough equity in the home that you can pay off your original mortgage and still get that cash differential based on the new value, the after repair value from your renovations and appreciation.
Okay. Emily's also asking, can you use the cash out refinance to build an ADU, or does it need to be a different property? So I literally can take this money and do whatever I want with it. I could just like go off the grid and like live in a boat if I wanted.
I mean, maybe you should. That's great right now.
So whatever cash you get from a cash out refinance, whatever you want to do with it, Yeah.
Preferably legal, but you know, that's your call too. I won't advise you on that part.
Yeah, I mean, preferably try to invest it, put it in a money market account or something, but at least. And then Allison saying, are there still drive-by appraisals happening? Any other ways to make the total cost associated as cheap as possible? Mine was not a drive-by. They like came into my house with a mask and like this is one thing I didn't add. So like when I forgot to add the steps of my appraisal in, but I've saved like every single step in detail on like a highlight on my Instagram. So if you ever want to just like get into the nitty gritty of like all the steps, you can watch that. But for my appraisal, I was like nervous because I looked up comps and my house is kind of like strange. I know what I could sell it for, but I was like, I need to find like houses that have sold pretty recently that are at a certain price point. I didn't know what it was going to price for. So I like wrote down a list of like all the renovations I did. And then I also added that list to a list of comps that I pulled. So homes that had recently sold that I like would want them to kind of look through. I don't know if they consider that. I actually don't know if I got a copy of my appraisal, Richelle, did I?
Oh, I don't know if I sent it to you, but I can.
Okay, yeah, I would love to see that. So that, and then I was there. So they asked me questions about the flooring I use. And so it was good to like give that. And one of my clients, he actually he just did a refinance or an appraisal, and he didn't have that down. Like he didn't give them comps and he didn't write down everything he'd done. And they appraised his house really low. Weirdly, like he got another appraisal done and then it was priced a lot higher. So
it's one of those things that I'm glad you touched on that too, because this is one of the things that I tell people, like I have my list of tips for people when they're going through this, because it should not be so subjective, but unfortunately people are people. Yes. So the reality is when you walk into, and you think about it, like when you're shopping for homes, when you walk into a home that's really beautiful and smells nice and it's clean and it looks, you know, fresh and modern, there's psychology to that, and you're going to associate it with a higher value than something that's like crappy and messy. So even like a really deep clean and good scented candles, I had mine done recently and I made cookies, and like, you know, gray area of like how much you're bribing someone. And especially since I'm in the industry, but similar to Kristina, I just like chatted up the appraiser about how excited I was about my project and like all the renovations I had done and like all the stuff that's, you know, all these homes in the neighborhood, like someone built these brand new homes that are going for $450, and like just talked all of that up. So if you are getting an appraisal and you need the value to be high, talk to us about some tips for that, because there are definitely some things you can do to hopefully influence that value.
Yeah, I gave my client all the comps, and that's what he uses ammo to like raise his appraisal price. Oh, and Elise is asking what an ADU is. An ADU is an accessory dwelling unit, which is a fancy term for like a back house, a tiny house. So yeah, that's essentially what it is. Allison saying, so fees are way less if you just do refinancing versus cash out.
Yeah, I just replied to that one. So your fees will actually be pretty much the same. Loan fees, title fees. Some of those title fees and prepaid interest, those kinds of things will vary based on the loan amount. Some of them are just flat rate loan fees that it's not going to make a difference the type of loan that you're doing. The biggest difference in fees will be whether or not you're escrowing the loan.
Okay, I think we can move on now.
Yeah. Pros and cons. That's a cute house also in that picture. Like I want that tile. Okay, so pros and cons. We've talked about a lot of pros, obviously. Getting cash out. You're able to use that money for whatever it is that you want to do. It's an incredible investment strategy. In some cases, you can lower your interest rate and potentially even your payment, depending again on your loan amounts. What if you had PMI before, which I don't know if you said that, Kristina, that's another benefit of your loan, right? And doing this refi is we're able to get the PMI off that you might otherwise continue to pay. So I think we've kind of sold you the pros of that. We also obviously want to touch on the cons, because this is not a one size fits all strategy that you should just go out and do. Cons, and this maybe is just more of a condition than a con, which same first three letters. You obviously have to have the equity in your home for this to make sense and for the numbers to line up to even be a possibility or a strategy. You're also resetting the clock on the mortgage. So if you were in a 30-year mortgage and you're doing another 30-year mortgage, that 30 years starts over. That pay down that you've had, or the timeline pay down, I guess, of the first couple of years that you've owned the property, it doesn't go away because you've paid down towards the principal as well, but you do have to start over on that clock. Your interest rate could also go up. So again, something to compare, and just make sure you're looking at your numbers closely when you're thinking about that. And then you do also have a much larger loan amount. So whereas Kristina only had a loan amount of $237 on her house right now, she's basically signing up for what is a much larger loan amount, which again, doing this strategy just to have that cash and spend it wildly and, go live on a boat, maybe not a good strategy, but with an investment strategy in mind, knowing that you're going to make a larger return on your investment, a larger percentage interest than you are paying on that amount, which is not that hard to do when you're in 3%, high 3% range, is still a really great thing to do, but just know that you're increasing the loan amount.
I think this kind of goes with it. Does recession/market slowing down make refinances riskier than it was a few months ago? Higher risk of going underwater?
So I would say, so in Texas has very specific laws around this. This does not exist in every state, but many states put some policies in place after the 2008 recession to protect against things like this, because so many people did go upside down in that economy. My personal opinion, in Austin, if you're only tapping out to 80% LTV, it would be really hard to go upside down. Like the market would have to plummet more than 20% for you to be upside down in the property, if that's what your numbers look like. So I don't think it's necessarily super isolated, as far as a market and both state and city markets, whether or not you're going to go underwater. But my personal opinion is that it's not really that much of a risk in Austin. I will say, just touching on this a little bit, higher risk, and this is not a higher risk issue, but because banks are treating refinances as slightly higher risk right now, that's why you're seeing, or we're seeing, margins on interest rates for refinances in particular. And then also we're seeing a lot more on refinance loans, significantly higher pricing sensitivity related to credit score. So cash out refis especially are going to be extremely sensitive to credit score. So even a few points might make a difference in the rate that you're eligible for. This is another thing to think about when you're planning this out, is making sure that your credit is in really great shape so that you don't get hit on your interest rate.
Yeah, because I thought I had a great credit score, but I think you were like, oh, if you pay off like this or something, it'll go up. And I was like, oh, that really affects it that much. So yeah. Lisa's asking, is the refi process more difficult if you are self-employed versus an employee at W-2? I'm assuming. Richelle, yes, right? Like it's just like you're applying for a loan?
Yeah. And yes. So it is basically the same as if you're applying for a loan. So if you're newly self-employed, or you're the kind of self-employed person who's like me and writes off a lot of your expenses, yes, it's going to be a little bit more difficult to get a loan. I've had some clients recently who had W-2 jobs when they bought their house, and then have since become self-employed fairly recently. So unfortunately, even though they qualified for the loan, a couple of years ago, now they're not, because they have pretty recent self-employment income. So typically we're going to need to see at least 2 full years of tax returns for self-employed borrowers, which definitely can be an obstacle, for some people trying to get a loan. That said, if you are self-employed and have been for longer than that and have a pretty good amount of income, there's no real difference as far as how tricky it might be.
Yeah, I feel like there's a good handful of our first-time buyers who are self-employed, and if you have 2 years backing and a good amount of income those 2 years, you should be fine.
Yeah.
Let's see, is the
timer downside of multiple appraisals? Yeah. So I wouldn't recommend multiple. There's lots of things you can do before you go to multiple appraisal situation.
Question, so people did they see it?
Okay, so the
Is
question, yeah, is there any harm or downside if you have to get multiple appraisals? So Kristina referenced a friend who went and got another appraisal so that their value would be higher to qualify for the refi and make it make sense. So yes, the cost of the appraisal, you know, it's usually around $500 to $700 depending on the bank. So double that basically if you're getting two. But also I would be hesitant to order another appraisal without going through, there's like several disputation process you can go through. You can have a realtor pull comps. You can send it into the appraisal and like argue the value. There's a lot of things that you can do before you have to pay for that other one. So just things to think about.
my loan is a 30-year loan for my refi. Someone asked me. It is.
Do you want to say why why are you keeping it at 30 years instead of going down to 25 or 20?
I mean, it's probably,
You don't have a reason.
I don't know. I think it's probably because it's like a better option for me right now. Like I don't want to pay a higher mortgage payment every month.
And that's really what it would come down to, especially for 20 or 25, you're not going to see a difference in rate. So you're just going to increase your mortgage payment. I also tend to advise people to, if you're thinking about a lower term and you're not sure, stick with the longer term and then put yourself on a voluntary payment schedule for a 15 or 20-year loan, which you can just calculate that out and figure out what you need to be paying to track yourself at, you know, basically pay off a 30-year mortgage in 15 years without being absolutely locked into that payment, which could potentially put you in a little bit trickier situation if anything changes in your personal finances, or could impact your cash flow as well if it's a rental property.
Yeah, like typically I pay an extra mortgage payment every year or two. But yeah, so remember with this house, I'm going to probably try to rent it out, and I'm going to try to rent it for $2,000. So I don't want it to go too much higher because I don't know if I'll be able to cover it. So that's the plan. And if I get extra money every year, I can just throw it towards the mortgage. Oh yeah, I forgot. Brianna she doesn't have a house in Austin, her house is in Florida. So all this probably is pretty similar, just except for like maybe the rules on.
Yeah, I don't know what their laws are on LTV. I don't think it would be more than 80%, like that you would be able to do like that your LTV could go higher. But yeah, I can't speak to Florida. I'm not licensed there, so I don't know the rules.
Okay, so people, I think this is the biggest confusion is people are always like, get refinances, cash out refinances, home equity loan that's what HELOC means, home equity loan of credit.
Line of credit, yeah.
And a home equity loan. So you can kind of, Richelle,
okay, so a HELOC and a home equity loan. These are some other options to tap into your equity that function just a little bit differently than your cash out refi. So as we've been talking about, the cash out refi, you're basically getting a brand new mortgage and starting over that 30-year clock, starting over your payments, everything's like fresh from scratch and you get that cash. With a home equity line of credit, what you're doing is keeping your existing mortgage and figuring out, again, what your equity looks like up to that 80% LTV. So the numbers would look very, very similar. If Kristina were to do this, I can't speak to that process. I don't actually do HELOCs or home equity line of credit. But the numbers are calculated this exact same way. She would potentially be able to get an $84,000 line of credit. And in this situation, there's a couple benefits of this. One, you could have that money and it would be interest free if you weren't using it. So basically it would just be sitting in a bank account as a line of credit, almost as if you had a credit card with an $84,000 limit that you hadn't spent any money on. You obviously don't make any payments or don't pay any interest towards that money if you're not using it. You can then start tapping into that money at a minimum of $4,000 increments, and then could potentially, again, do the exact same thing, use all of it if you wanted to and purchase a property, the same way you would with a cash out refinance. One of the downsides to this is that a HELOC is going to be a variable interest rate. So with your cash out refi, if you're doing a conventional fixed rate mortgage, which is what most people are doing, you're locked in at your new interest rate for the full 30 years of the loan. A HELOC is going to be based on market rates, and those will adjust either monthly or quarterly, depending on the bank that you get that line of credit from. And, it's the kind of thing right now might look phenomenal because interest rates are incredibly low, But if something changed and things go back up, all of a sudden you could have an interest rate on your $84,000 that's 6, 7, 8% versus the 3.875 that Kristina's now locked into. So some trade-offs there. And again, I think it is kind of nice to have access to that money and not have to use it and not have to pay it back if you're not using it, versus Kristina has to make payments on her mortgage immediately. I know someone who uses this, they don't have an emergency fund, they just have a home equity line of credit because it functions the same way for them. And I think that's an interesting or financial strategy as one way to look at your whole picture. With home equity loan, again, numbers are calculated the exact same way. We're figuring out that maximum equity. And this is what people are talking about when you say a second lien or you've mortgaged your home. Typically, this is what we're referring to. And this means you're taking out another loan. So you're still keeping your existing mortgage. In Kristina's case, that $237,000 balance that she's been paying on since 2017 stays exactly what it is. She keeps making those payments. Nothing changes with her rate or her terms. And then she would take out a second loan for that $84,000 that might have a different interest rate on it and different terms. Those are usually a little bit shorter, like a 20-year term, which is actually what a HELOC is as well. You're gonna have a 20-year on a HELOC typically instead of the 30. But, and you also probably have a slightly higher interest rate than you would on a full mortgage. But again, two options that will allow you to access that home equity in a little bit different way, but pretty much the same amount of money.
Chloe asks, I don't actually know this. I don't think, but she said, do you have to have intent to stay for 1 year? No,
this is freaking
for primary
magic. Cool stuff. I refinanced my property in January, and I don't live there anymore. I've also had clients that I've worked with. Steph had some clients last year, and unfortunately this didn't work out because of their appraisal, but we actually had 2 loans under contract at the same time where we were going to refinance them. And as long as you close, like, that property is your primary residence up until the day that you move out. So we were going to close about a week before their purchase on a refinance, and then they were going to do the same thing and use that money to purchase a new property that they were then going to move into as a primary residence. So
yeah, I feel like that's why this is such a great strategy. If you can buy, like, even thinking if you're renting now and you're like, if you could do this strategy of buying like a house where you like maybe fix it up a little bit, but you, wait a few years, fix it up, and then like see the difference. If it could appraise for much higher, it's just like a crazy strategy where you could pull out cash and buy another property if you wanted to. So I don't know.
Yeah, if you think about it, like, you're going to buy an investment property potentially and another primary residence. So that's really cool because you took your one house and you turn it into 3 houses, which again, we're talking like long-term strategy and how to really grow up a portfolio. This is how to do this quickly, faster than like how much longer would it take you to actually just save up $84,000.
Yeah,
right?
oh my gosh. I was like, I've never had crazy to have that much in your bank account.
Yeah.
It's insane. Okay, let me see. Oh,
Yeah.
Okay. So I think we're done here. If you guys have any other questions or if anything wasn't very clear, I know we use like a lot of terms that you might not be familiar with. But if not,
You have a couple. Kristina, is your strategy to purchase multiple properties and profit from rising property values, since the $2,000 your tenants are going to pay won't cover your mortgage payment?
I answered below. So I actually plan to have tenants cover that mortgage. I think if I just rent it out, it might be harder. I might have to add something to my house, like maybe add the curb appeal or add something in the backyard. But it's kind of crazy. When I rented out like the rooms in my house, I was charging like $850. I think it's just location. People really want to be in a certain location. You can charge for a lot. Yeah, Steph says, I bet you could get $2,200 for your place long term. I don't know. Like, I think maybe I could, just because I think the location, having a backyard, and it's like a bungalow type style, which people like. Colleen says, is the HELOC or home equity line of credit a better option if you're just looking to pull cash out of the home to cover home renovations? Or is that risky given the potential high interest rates?
I think it depends on your plan for paying it back. So in a strategy where you're taking out that money to purchase an investment property that's going to make money, like first of all, the house, you're going to rent that out and someone else is going to pay that. And then you're going to buy another property that is probably going to have some rental income associated with it as well. That's awesome because you know you have a payback strategy. If you're just taking out a $50,000 loan against your house because you want a screened-in porch, like, yeah, me too, but know that that's not an investment, right? That is a choice that you're making to live in a nicer home, which is a justifiable choice if you can afford that. But just know how you're paying that back. Like it's an investment, you have a strategy for that loan to be paid back and you're using debt to buy assets. If you're just pulling that out to cover some renovations, what's your plan for paying that back? Are you paying that out of pocket or, and is it worth that additional expense?
Allison said, any creative ways to think ahead if you just recently switched to freelancing contract work? I did not even think about that part of things. I mean, I think I don't think there's any workaround besides getting those 2 years in unless you like partner with someone. I think I definitely have leveraged partnerships heavily. I've not bought a property without a partner. So, and because I bought my first house when I it was a little risky, but I was like making barely any money and found a friend with a W-2 job who wanted to start investing as well. So I think, I don't know, anything else to add, Richelle, to that?
To boost up your application, get a W-2 job if you can.
Yeah.
This is one of those gray areas, don't tell me as your loan officer, but since we're not having a dialogue right now, it doesn't matter. But you can get a job and have it for a few weeks and refinance and not your job anymore.
My original lender told me to do that and I was like, no, I will find another way. And that's why I partnered. I was like, I can't go back to that.
Be planning for a really solid 2 years of income and don't be aggressive with your write-offs, which means you're going to pay a little bit more in taxes. But yeah.
Brianna says, curious what you think about mortgage insurance. I assume with an initial 3% down, Kristina had to pay mortgage insurance. So I put 10% down, but yeah, we had to pay mortgage insurance, but mine was like $80 a month. I kind of just like see it as one payment. And like in the first year or two, I had a goal of like, how much could I cut down my mortgage? So I actually essentially was only paying $700 a month because I was Airbnb-ing a room in my house. But I don't know. I don't see mortgage insurance as like a deterrent of putting less than 20% down. I think even now, why not put less money down? The interest rates are crazy low. Like there was a time, I think, when I was growing up, my dad was always like, put 20% down. And I think at that time, just interest rates were much higher. It probably made more sense. Also, maybe his generation just had more cash, but we don't have that. And I would rather have savings and not put all my money into one thing. So I don't know. I don't really see.
Yeah, I think so. This is another one to look at the numbers. If you work with me, I make you a side-by-side comparison of how this looks, because PMI, so your private mortgage insurance, is also similar to an interest rate. It's going to be a factor based on your credit score, your loan to value, your debt to income ratio, and all of those other numbers that we're looking in a loan application. So in your case, your PMI was actually only $60 a month. So if you think about your 10% down, if the alternative, if the alternative was basically putting down another $28,000 or paying $60 a month, which one would you choose, right? It really, especially if that's the only thing that makes it possible. So definitely look at the numbers on that one as well. It's something that you can figure out exactly what that looks like. But I find more often than not when I'm talking to borrowers about this, once they see those, it's almost always a no-brainer to put down less cash and then use the difference. There's a major opportunity cost with that difference in cash to either buy another property or other investment strategies, savings, repairs, renovations, those kinds of things. So yeah, definitely look at the numbers.
How does getting approved for loans work with partnerships?
So it depends on the kind of partnership. If it's a couple and you're married, it's going to be a little bit different than if you are non-married, and it's going to be different whether or not both people are going to live in the house as well. But think of it like, for the sake of planning, ultimately just know that both people are going through the full loan approval process. So we have to make sure the numbers make sense for both people that are on the loan, for income, for debt and liabilities, for your credit score. We're considering all of that together, like both of you together. So you can go through the loan process. Like Kristina and I, for example, are on a loan together on the property that Steph and I own. We decided to put only the two of us on that loan so that Steph could use her buying power elsewhere. And we had a strategy to like continue to buy properties and like swap out who carried the loans, because we all wanted to have multiple properties and knew that we didn't want to max that out. But Kristina and I went through that process pretty much separately. Like, we were both on the loan, but I didn't learn anything about Kristina's financial. She didn't learn anything about mine. We just worked directly with the loan officer to get that stuff through. And they considered both of our applications together to be able to approve us.
Yep. Okay. Given the quarantine, do you think the Airbnb being a place is still a realistic strategy? So, I'm actually in the process of my boyfriend is listing his house on Airbnb. He was originally renting out each room and cash flowing that way. And it was like great cash flow, but it's a hassle to like manage that. So actually Steph's mom, I think Allison, you work for her now, right? So she owns a Airbnb management company. So she's been helping us like figure out the best strategy of like how to Airbnb his house. Cause his house is like in 78725, and it's like a East Austin zip code that's not in like the city, you know? So we were interested even before COVID happened, like how it would do, but then we listed it like 2 days ago and he already has a booking in June. I mean, so I have also heard from her that people are still booking Airbnbs. People want to like leave New York and they're coming to Austin, like bigger cities, and they're doing longer stays. So it's probably not as crazy as it was, but I would definitely have strategies when anytime you buy a house, you always have to have a few strategies. Just, you don't want to be tied down to one option.
Totally.
Anything else? I think
there was one other. Oh, how long does it take to refi to close? If you want to concurrently do refi and buy another property, should you give 30 days for refi before locking new property under contract? Great question. There are more than one person on this call who are currently refinancing with me who can testify that unfortunately it's taking a lot longer than normal right now.
Yeah.
So typically in a normal market, a refi may take only like 2 or 3 weeks. We can turn them out pretty quickly. Right now, because we are still in the wake of the lowest interest rates of all time since the beginning of mortgage interest rates, everybody and their brother wanted to refinance their house. And so for perspective, last year annually, the entire mortgage industry did about $2 trillion in business. In March and April, there was approximately $5 trillion in the loan pipeline across the country. So basically more than double what was an annual national volume is currently in the pipeline. So you can imagine that would affect underwriting turn times and other such things. So refinances are taking a lot longer than normal. So if you're talking right now, definitely make sure you get clarity, and that may depend on the bank that you're working with. Smaller bank or larger banks might have more additional resources. So certainly look around and ask that question so that you can time that correctly. But normally 30 days would be plenty of time to refinance your house and be able to purchase a property.
And so we
do it, like just do the cash out refi.
So me and my sister were like, you know, I'm in the process of doing this cash out refinance, and it's just so happens we found this like really cool, like I said, dome house in Florida, and we were like, wait, could we possibly buy it? So she got approved for a mortgage. And the lender had a contingency where it was like, oh yeah, you are approved if you are removed from this other loan. So like once I cash out refinance, she's going to be pulled off the loan for our house. So they were able to do workarounds, but it was like, you can buy a house, but before you close, this refinance needs to be done.
It's basically going to be contingent upon that for sure.
Oh yeah. So we do have a Facebook group. We're gonna email you all after this, also, or tomorrow, and we'll give you the link. I guess we can also put it in here if Celeste, you want to do that. But I think if there's no other questions, we can do introductions. Oh, nope, there's one more. Where does debt to income play a part in a refi? If you want to do a refi and buy another concurrently, do you need to rent out your current house first and show that additional rental income?
That is going to depend on how much money you make. So yes, your debt to income it's going to qualify the exact same way as it would for a purchase. So if you're trying to do, but they're also considered sort of separately, like the way Kristina just described, like her new loan would be contingent upon the refinance going through. You can structure this in a way that it would go to, like, if I were setting it up, for example, I would make sure that it goes to the same underwriter so that they see the full picture. But we're doing one loan based on you still living in the house. We're not considering any other property because for the sake of this loan, you don't know what's going on. Like, it's irrelevant. We're just refinancing your property as a primary residence. And then the second property, we're looking at that you're going to purchase and move into, but we also know that you're going to refinance this house and potentially rent it out. So if you had leases lined up and we needed to make the property contingent upon that mortgage being paid off and refinanced, you could potentially still work it out concurrently. Again, I'd say if you're thinking about this, it's worth just doing that cash out refi right now and throwing that in a high yield savings account so that you have it when you're ready to go, rather than trying to rush it, because being under contract on one property is stressful enough, and doing two loans at the same time, I don't mind it because I make twice as much money, but it's really stressful. So don't do it if you know it's like a possibility. I just don't know if it's worth it.
I'm putting, the minute I get all that cash, I'm putting it in an account, money market account, and then I'm going to look for houses, but I'm hoping like in the next 6 months I can buy another house, but there's not like I don't want there to be like a rush to force me into something.